Hello everyone, and welcome to my video on ethical research, citation, impact factor, and why we need the Institutional Review Board. So welcome. Let's discuss ethical research, citation, and impact factor. When discussing ethics in scientific research, our central question should be, as writers and researchers, what do we owe our colleagues and the science community at large? First, we owe fairness. To recognize the contribution of others is important. References play a huge role in contributing to scholarly and scientific research. They allow the reader to explore a given line of thinking as you provide transparent citations that lead the reader to discover further. A disproportionate number of errors often include in reference sections and even the most prestigious biomedical journals. A 2000 study by Sievers and Holt confirmed this fact. When we think about citation, who gets cited and why does it matter? Impact factor is a measure of the frequency with which an average article in a journal has been cited in a particular year. It is used to measure the importance or rank of a journal by calculating how many times a particular article is cited. The higher the impact factor, the more highly ranked the journal. This is one tool you can use to compare journals in a subject category. But how can these metrics be a flawed way to measure how articles can be judged? What happens when we say articles with higher numbers of citations are then more likely to be cited? What does this mean for the field? In his article on citations in A Scientist's Guide to Writing, Stephen B. Hurd says that science is cumulative. New research builds on earlier work, extending, reinterpreting, or correcting it as a result. Every modern scientific paper references contributions to the literature, so deciding when and where to cite is important for science. However, when we reward vast amounts of citations for a particular article, it may incentivize people to inflate citations through self-citation. In a 2019 article appearing in the multidisciplinary journal Nature, a new database revealed that hundreds of scientists have amassed more than 50% of their citations from themselves or their co-authors, while the median self-citation rate is 12%. This study could help to flag potential extreme self-promoters and possible citation farms, in which clusters of scientists massively cite each other. When we incentivize citation-based metrics, unintended consequences can result in extreme, ethically questionable measures. But what are the effects of failing to give citation from an ethical standpoint? In the year 1950, Rosalind Franklin was awarded a 3-year fellowship to work in John Randall's biophysics unit at King's College, London. Franklin was hired because of her expertise in X-ray crystallography, a technique that uses X-ray beams to analyze the 3D structure of crystallized molecules. At the Cavendish Laboratory in Cambridge, nearby, Francis Crick and James Watson were working on the theoretical model of DNA, not in close communication with Franklin. In 1953, they gleaned crucial insights about DNA structure from one of her X-ray diffraction photos and from a summary of her unpublished research submitted to the Medical Research Council. In particular, photo 51 of the B form of a molecule revealed DNA in 2 distinct helixes. At the same time that Watson and Crick were solving the structure of DNA using Franklin's data, she was arriving at nearly the same exact conclusions. She had been preparing 3 manuscripts on her data collected at King's College, also concluding that DNA had a double helix structure. In her published data, she added the following statement: "Thus, our general ideas are consistent with the model proposed by Crick and Watson." Unfortunately, Franklin would not be included with Watson and Crick for the Nobel Prize in 1962, as she passed away from ovarian cancer sustained through repeated exposure to X-rays in April 1958, and the Nobel Prize is never awarded posthumously. But without Rosalind Franklin's groundbreaking work, it may have taken another decade before the double helix structure of DNA had been fully recognized. The amount of citation which a source receives is also not a sign that a source is trustworthy. In 1998, Andrew Wakefield attempted to publish a paper in the Lancet on the links between vaccines and colitis and autism spectrum disorders. This paper was accompanied by much aplomb in the press, a photo news release, and a press conference. The current version of Andrew Wakefield's paper on links between the MMR vaccine and autism currently has over 3,000 citations. These citations don't necessarily indicate that this source is worthwhile, as Wakefield faced a General Medical Council fitness to practice panel accused of serious professional misconduct, along with 2 other authors of his study. The Lancet later retracted the paper, as it emerged that Wakefield had unethically paid children at his son's 10th birthday party to give blood samples for his research. It took the Lancet 12 years after publication to eventually retract the paper, but by then damage had been done and public views of vaccines had been heavily destabilized. But what protects participants in such research from similar unethical methods? The Tuskegee syphilis study, sponsored by the U.S. Department of Health, Education, and Welfare, began in 1932. The study investigated the effects of untreated syphilis in 400 black men from the Tuskegee, Alabama area. The researchers did not tell the men that they were in an experiment. They believed that they were getting treatments for, quote, bad blood, which was a common belief at the time. Researchers withheld treatment for syphilis even when penicillin became widely available in 1950. In 1972, a news story from the Associated Press alerted the public and Congress to the ethical problems of the research. Finally, the U.S. government settled a lawsuit brought by the participants and their families. These men did not know that they were in a study, nor were they asked their consent. There have even been cases closer to home, across the river at MIT.
A hug, a kiss, and a good hot Quaker Oats breakfast. The best school day start you can give your youngster. For just as his soul is nourished by a hug and a kiss, so will his young body be nourished by a good hot breakfast of Quaker Oats.
For years, orphaned boys at Fernald State School were subjected to experiments using radioactive tracers in Quaker oatmeal. As a part of the study, boys were fed oatmeal and milk laced with radioactive iron and calcium. In another experiment, scientists directly injected the boys with radioactive calcium. In 1998, MIT promised to pay victims a settlement as a result of the damage caused by these radiation tests. The Tuskegee syphilis study changed research practices as the National Research Act was signed into law, creating a National Commission for the Protection of Human Subjects of Biomedical and Behavioral Research experiments. The Belmont Report was the Commission's summary of ethical principles that form the basis of acceptable processes for recruiting human subjects. These principles include respect for humans, beneficence, justice. Beneficence means the duty to maximize the benefit to harm ratio for individual subjects and research programs as a whole. Justice focuses on the duty to assign the burden and benefits of research in a fair manner. In 1991, additional regulations were created as safeguards for pregnant women, additional protection for prisoners, and additional protections for children. These regulations are intended to apply to protect those who may not have the agency to say no and exercise informed consent if subjected to scientific research. The Institutional Review Board takes part on the institutional level in submitting requests for human research to a panel of judges that present a cost-benefits analysis of the risks and rewards of potential research. The parts that go into an IRB application include the application itself, a certificate of completion of an online training, and a consent form that's usually signed by the humans involved in the study. Additional documentation can include interview questions, survey instruments, and an example letter for the invitation to participate. Here's just a glimpse of what an IRB application looks like. It includes multiple pages, multiple spots to include additional information from the investigator and from any other investigators in the study. The IRB is intended to highlight these standards of respect highlighted in the Belmont Report: respect for persons, beneficence, and justice. While institutional review board applications provide their own problems, they exist to prevent atrocities such as the Tuskegee syphilis experiments and other similar experiments on humans that see humans as a means to an end and not as individuals. As we consider such difficult ethical questions, it's important to think about how these attitudes towards human life may still enter into and be reflected in current studies. It's important to think about how a particular study was certified by its own institutional review board. Human experimentation under unethical standards continues to occur today. Some recent examples are the iCompare and FIRST clinical trials, which were intended to test whether excessively long work-hour schedules for medical residents at U.S. hospitals cause more death and injuries to patients. Disturbingly, the IRBs responsible for certifying this study identified it as a study that did not involve human participants, putting the resident doctors and their patients at risk. No research exists within a vacuum, and it's important to consider how these unethical studies in the past affect research still today. Thank you for watching this video. If you have any questions about the sources I've used in this video or any other additional questions, please feel free to look in my notes below or email me. Thank you for watching. Have a nice day.